How about another round of applause for Malcolm? That was great talk, Malcolm. All right, we've gotten some questions from people that have been tweeting, so I will just lob them at you, and you can full court press them back.
Okay.
All right.
People look at the size of a bank, and they make assumptions about its ability to serve their needs, or its ability to be safe and stable.
Assuming always that larger is always better, which
is
your point
nonsense.
is not true, right?
There's just no, it's one of those, it's a completely fallacious point. You know, Citibank's in 150 countries or whatever. I'm better off at Citibank.
I'm sure they'll be looking out for little old me,
Yes, exactly,
right?
exactly.
So instead of downplaying and perhaps hiding the fact that we're this little credit union, present that as what it truly is, which is a strength. Yes, we're small. I know your name when you walk through the door. Yeah. I know that you have 2 kids. I know more about you because we're small, and present it as...
That idea is an incredibly powerful one, but it has to be communicated.
Right. We are not a monolith. We are not a giant company, and because of that, we're going to do better for you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great answer. And perhaps because you're smaller, you have more of a hands-on ability to teach the technology to your clients so that they're not put off by it or intimidated by it, and by then they're going to adopt it more fully, right?
There's no questions about basketball. I really thought this was just going to be about basketball. It's going to be fantastic. I could talk about the intricacies of the full court press.
And how the basketballs are made. Unfortunately, no. What's the best way to sustain effort in the face of adversity? You know, you talk about that the energy is required is much more difficult to find. So once you find it, how do you keep it from dissipating, especially when there's disappointment and failure?
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. This is the hardest piece of them all. Tightly knit organizations that come from specific cultures have great advantages in finding effective leaders, right? They're much more in touch with their talent pool and much more in touch with what they want from their leadership.
Well, it's the contrast again between IBM and Apple. The institutional cultures in those 2 companies could not be more different. Yeah. But how do you sustain that in a credit union office? Does your research show that it's carrot and stick, threatening to fire people, involving people in a more higher level of decision making? What are some of the better strategies to?
Well, I'm going to answer this question by analogy. One of the most
a basketball analogy?
Yes.
All right, good.
The kind of effort that I want from my players is sustainable because I really do have a team, right?
In the truest sense of the word.
In the truest sense of the word. I have everyone contributing equally.
But in business, certainly, in other arenas, that's a reality as well. Some people are differently abled. Yeah. You know, some people are great interpersonally with people. Some people are better working in the back on the computer.
He's not saying that his players are all identical. He's saying that he relies on them all equally, which I think is a slightly different point.
I came up through Second City in Chicago, and it was a very egalitarian group. We would do a show, and then at the end of every show, we would all go backstage, and we would cobble together an improv set for another 40 minutes of comedy. And there were no bad ideas. People would throw something on the table, and if you thought it stunk, you had to say no, but how about if we do this? Yeah. And that way, if we went out and then we did a show and something totally died, it wasn't my fault, it was our fault. Yeah. So you absorb the failures more easily, and you all are lifted up by the success. And it does change
the mindset.
It totally does.
Yeah. And
it gets you to, I think, contribute more freely and more energetically to the common good of whatever the organization is. Yeah. So what you're saying is that's a leadership thing that can be instilled in people. All right. Last question here. You were talking about disagreeableness and conviction and being iconoclastic and a contrarian. If you're on that path, how do you know that you're not wrong?
You don't.
You know, you're cutting against the grain from everybody. Yeah. And you've highlighted a lot of, Steve Jobs is Steve Jobs, but that's rarefied air. Yeah. What kind of questions can you ask yourself or your colleagues to make sure that you're just not an idiot?
You don't know. I mean, but no course of action that any of us take comes with that kind of guarantee. They are saying, I'm doing this not because the world thinks it's okay. I do this because I think it's a good idea, and I'm going to gather evidence on.
I think it's a good idea, and here are my reasons.
Here are my reasons.
Perhaps they're thinking it out more thoroughly than the people that are just lemmings going off the cliff.
I'm going to justify what I'm doing, and I'm going to see whether it works in the real world.
And then going back to what you said earlier, if some of those things don't work, you tinker and you change and you set a new set of priorities up,
Yeah.
and then you keep following that until
And
you
that's
fine-tune it.
in that Steve Jobs story I told, what's amazing is he shows up, he goes back to his company, and he says to all of his people, what we have been doing up until now is wrong.
I think that's a great point. Yeah. Being wrong is not evil, and it's not always bad. Sometimes it can be a good thing if you recognize it for what it is and are able to move forward and past it.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate the time that you spent with us today. We appreciate your insights, and I'm looking forward to your book. Ladies and gentlemen, Malcolm Gladwell.
Thanks so much.